in between this pause, we talk about that some people tried contracts or looked at them but found that it's too wordy, so you pollute your code with additional statements, so it became less readable. And next couple of things will actually show you how to simplify your code, so how to make it simpler. So first, we will talk about object invariance. What it is, you can define some condition or some function which will be executed every time after your public function calls. So in our case, for example, we have this increase salary. So every time when user call increase salary, after that our new invariant function will be called to do some checks, some verification of the state of the object. So you can define one object invariant, you can define many of them, and all of them will be called for all your public functions. And how you can do this? You just define new method. Inside of this new method, you define some statements or some conditions and mark this method with this contract invariant method. So that's it. Sorry, with attribute. And this attributes will, when function is marked with this attribute, you cannot put any logic there. So all what you can do, you can put this contract.invariant call and put some statement inside. Just show you how it looks like. So, for example, here we'll define a new function. Name is can be anyone, any name, and I can use this attribute. And then what I can do, I can say contract dot invariant and salary not equal 0. So I will compile it. And what it says that it cannot be public, so I need to make it private. Okay, that's it. So by doing this, you are ensure your consumers of your class that salary will always stay not equal 0 as a result of all public calls. So now you can remove something like this. So if you have multiple conditions in different methods, this ensures calls, you can eliminate them and have just one function that will be called all the time. Is it clear? That works.
Philosophically, why would I do that instead of just declaring a constant?
Instead of which constant?
So salary is a really bad example for a constant, but if I want something to be invariant, why wouldn't I declare it invariant as a constant, for instance?
No, but this is invariant for your class. So you're defining some conditions for your class. So you're providing contracts that, for example, for this class, salary will be always more than 0, name never be empty, and what else? I don't know. Age will always be more than 18. So you define all the set of conditions, and class consumers can rely on this. So they can build logic based on these assumptions.
I'm only coming up with trivial examples of why or what. How have you used this?
So we have seen some domain models, and for these domain models, we define, for example, some field unknown. So we are saying that when you retrieve this object, we are using these values never null, and this information coming into documentation, and everybody who uses this class, they know that, okay, this is never null, I don't need to do any checks to verify this null, and it simplifies logic for the classes which use this domain class.
Another example is in a Navy monitor, you could statically prove that if a value is available, then has value is true. And if you've got a slew of 5 or 6 different monadic operators, you don't have to put that at the end of every one of the insurers. It's 3 lines. You put it once in the logic invariant, it's automatically checked. Even if you add something else to the class, another monadic operator, it automatically is checked because it's defined as invariant for the entire object.
And all object invariants defined in base class will be called in all derived classes. So it's derived as well. So next way how you can simplify or
Sorry, I have a, why would you use multiple object invariant functions?
it's
rather
possible, but
than-
usually we don't use multiple.
You just.
It's
put
just
multiple
one
things.
function with different
Yeah.
conditions. So maybe for readability you may want to have multiple, but yeah, in reality it's 1, 2 per class, and it's just one function with a couple of statements. We'll anyway use multiple.
For static analysis, it sometimes has difficulty with complex logical operations. It may be easier to give it several small ones rather than one complex one. I found it makes a difference in static analysis. It wouldn't make any difference on the runtime because it's going to execute the text.
And actually, we are not relied too much on static analysis, so my experience is a bit different, and I'll talk about this a bit later again. So, what you can do, you can define your contracts on interfaces and on abstract classes. So you can define one interface, define contract for this interface, and then all objects or all classes derived from this interface will automatically use this contract or have this contract. So it significantly simplifies how it looks. So it reduces number of contracts, so you don't need to put them in each class. You define it once for contract, and then it's automatically applied for everybody. So how it looks like. So let's probably have everything too complicated now. Let's remove something. Let's remove this. I will introduce some interface. Probably. Okay, so in this interface I will have just one method, and now I need to define a contract for this method. So what I'll do, I will create implementation. And this implementation needs actually to implement this method. So I will just copy. Link method. And I need to make a public as well. Okay, so then I need to return something. if I implement something. But in our particular case, we are not implementing this method, so we're implementing contract. So what we'll do, we will say throw not implemented exception. So we create this dummy class, which is only proposed to define some contracts. So we need actually to define this contract, and we will do the same. Requires and move it here. Okay. So this one will be our contract. We have interface. Now we need to link them together, and for this we will use interfaces. We'll put interfaces, and one will be contract, will be class, and now it will be type. Here. Okay, let's commence. And here we're defining like backlink to the interface. So we are saying again attribute, and it will be contract class for type of I employee. Okay. So now we can remove everything here except this. We can say that we derived it from I employee. Okay, and we have all benefits. So we don't, in our target class, we don't have any contracts. Instead, what we have interface, which says that we have definition of the contract for this interface in a class employee, and this class employee defines contracts. Then no logic, just contracts, and saying that okay, I'm a contract class for employee. So maybe I put names not very nicely, so I will rename this to employee contract. And this one will this. Okay. So let's see what will happen if we will go to the program. And can rename it back. And we'll say that we run this -1. Okay, compile. And it says that yes, we need. Actually, we need to make this abstract. Okay, so compile again and run, and we have the same error like we had before when we had contracts defined inside of our class. So we just derived from interface with contract, and we have the same behavior as before. And now what I want to show you, I want to go to the properties, and I will switch on static code analysis. Okay. And we'll go here. And we'll wait some time, and eventually, because now it's in background check, so eventually when this will be done, it will show that this condition is not valid. Let's make it first what I can do. done. So you see. So even without compilation, it's in background runs static code analysis, and without running my code, I already see that I have a mistake in my code. And this will, during debugging or during build, this will come as a warning, and I can have checkbox break on contract warnings, and then my build will be broken for all cases like this, based on static code analysis.
Sorry, does it give you contextual information, you know, have a red like, rule it's breaking, or do you have to go to, does it tell you which rule it's breaking when you do that?
Yeah,
Do you
it's-
have a red?
it actually shows my message. So the same what you will see when it's broken in runtime, it shows the same message here. Okay.
Can you use here assume like you did before?
Yes, we can use the same. So any questions about this? So this one we use a lot, and I really like it because it decouples your contracts from your classes, and it makes nice one set of conditions on one set of contracts for the whole hierarchy of classes. Another way to decouple your contracts from your class logic, to have contract abbreviation functions. So what you can do, you can define some function and put in this function several conditions or several contracts, mark this function with contract abbreviation attribute, and then just call this function from your target function. And then this contract abbreviation function will work as your contract. Is it clear? Or do you want to see it in Visual Studio? So let's go back in class. So what I can do, I can define a new function. And again, something simple. So I put attributes, contract abbreviator, and so, and then I can just call this function. Okay. So that's it. Even if it's not derived from here. This call will work as a check.
That's cool.
So one benefit of good benefit. One benefit that you remove some checks from your code. So you have just this function. You can have multiple checks here. Disadvantage that you don't have this direct access to this properties. So you need to check some state of the function, state of the class, not these variables.
I'm missing something. If you're calling the contractor with the function explicitly, why do you bother with the attribute?
Because it will work in the same way. So code rewriter will rewrite this to make it as a normal contract. So basically, if you compile this function will be replaced with a set of these contract definitions. And in the end code, it will be the same as you will put these definitions by yourself inside of the code. So it's a simplification of your code and make it nicer and make a group of contracts reusable for different functions.
So it forces the inline. Have you tried doing that if it's got something other than contracts inside to force the inline?
What do you mean?
You get a weird side effect. Yeah, that's the way my mind works.
Abbreviator that you can then have a set of contracts that are different for different methods, right? Because it looks very, very similar to, shoot, I forget what you called it before, where you pulled the invariant. Yeah, it looks very similar to the invariant,
Yeah.
except that
Except that you can have multiple functions, and
Okay.
these functions can be different set of contracts for different methods. Yes. But with invariant, it's applied automatically. You don't need to sync. You just define it, mark with attribute, and then it automatically works. Here, for each function, you need to call your own abbreviated function. Okay. So, actually, I want to change slightly. When I talk about benefits of the contracts, and basically, yeah, we talked about all things except a couple of small options. So you can work on arrays or lists or any enumerable sets with the contract. So for this, we have a couple of functions which allow you to say for each provide some enumerable object and provide condition. So we can work for this, but they are pretty expensive in terms of performance, so we don't use them. I don't know what's your experience.
I had difficulty getting them to work on the static analysis, but I didn't actually have a lot of need for it. So I played with it a little bit.
Yeah. So if you have input parameter array or list as input parameter, it may help. So you can say for each input parameter, this condition should be true, but it takes time, so just try to ignore them. So benefits. We talked about behavior in runtime, in debug time, so different behavior for different build conditions. We talked about static code analysis. And another thing that these code contracts actually recognized or recognizable by automatic help generation tools. So if you use sendCastle or document X to generate your document from the comments, from your XML comments, then this tool will recognize contracts in your code and will actually place these contracts inside of your documentation. So this is generated by document X, and you can see that there is a section contracts, and it says that this function requires that employee ID can be null. So thing you put in your definition of your contract goes directly here. So this is nice for people who use your classes, your public interfaces, so they directly see all assumptions you put into your public API. And how many people actually use some automatic generated tools? Some tools to generate that? And what do you use?
I use Docsnip.
Those.
Swashbuckle.
Swashbuckle. So we use Document X. If you didn't try, it's a plugin for Visual Studio. So inside of Visual Studio, you can easily add more samples, edit different comments. So without leaving Visual Studio, you can put even more than just XAML comments. That's why we like it. So we also talk about different conditions or different ways how to check different contracts. So go into the properties. Here you see the list. So I will read if you don't see it's perform runtime contract checking. By default it's switched off. I switch it on. I use full mode. But also you can have pre and post, preconditions, release requires, and none. So this is presets which you can use to define what exactly will happen with your code contracts during code rewritten phase. So now back to this. And what exactly is happening? So when you define full check level, then everything will be checked. So legacy means is if statement throw. So if you have something like this, it's considered as a legacy contract. And then you have this requires with custom exception, requires, ensures, object invariant, asserts, and assumes. So with full, everything will be checked. So your code will be completely rewritten, all code contracts will be completely replaced with a custom code. When you define pre and post, it removes these three items, and basically they will be simply removed. So nothing will happen. So for all marked contracts, they will be written and some specific code will be put in your binaries. And for invariants, asserts, assumes, your contract will be simply removed and nothing will be happening if you violate these contracts. Clear? And so on. So preconditions, release requires, and for none, basically you put your contracts, they will go into the help, but nothing will happen with your code. So even if you don't want to put anything in your final output, it's still beneficial to have contracts defined. At least you providing consumers of the class or users of the class idea what you want them to submit you. So you are defining what is expected contract. Yes, you are not hardly fail on this contract, but at least users can understand what they need to provide you.
So it's like saying please instead of a contract.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's fast, it doesn't write anything, so you can start with this. Put contracts, put none. You will have some benefits, you will have some experience how to write this, but you will not fail your code, you will not break any existing features. So about recommendations, how we started and how we recommend. Try to not put this in internal and private classes. So it's, again, add more noise, but usually internal private classes are under your control, so you know which inputs and outputs you expect. So we consider this as pretty safe and not put in. But for the new APIs and public APIs, we are saying at least put preconditions. So if you're just starting implementing code contracts, then try to start with preconditions and then see what you can put else. So how you can make your contracts more stronger. This is when you create new APIs. When you have existing subsystems or existing APIs, libraries, components, then before putting anything, analyze your code. So even if you assume that, yes, my code is tested with unit test and it shouldn't be used with these particular parameters, still analyze the code, see some edge cases, and make sure that you are not cutting some use cases of your library by making this contract. And as I said before, you can put contracts, you can say none in your build mode and have it as a just soft contract. For the settings, if you would like to follow this approach, so for debug, so this is debug mode, You can start with full. It will make your compilation time a bit slower, but then you will fail on all contracts. Plus, you can have here checkbox on assert on contract failure. Instead of the exception, it will show some nice assert dialog. So your testers, if you have testers and they test your application, will see something nicer and they will be able to copy exception text and put this text in Jira or your bug tracking system. And okay, so then for release mode, so what we usually do, we put release required. So if I go back here, so release requires is only checking for legacy, so something we had before we introduced contracts, and requires with custom exceptions. So basically, if we really want something to be thrown, then we put it like this, and all requires, ensures will not be checked. They will be just skipped. So for the bug, check everything and show assert. For release, show just this hard-coded legacy contracts. Then we also use this only public surface contracts. So what does it mean? It means that it automatically eliminates all possible contracts from private methods. So if even somebody decided to put some contracts on private methods, we don't want this for released code. So we check this and rewriter will remove. It will only leave contracts for the public methods.
Are you familiar with, excuse me, command line compilation with contracts?
I think MS Build automatically runs this, but we don't use. We use Visual Studio on build system, so but it should be possible because it's a command line tool, and basically in Visual Studio it's automatically put into the chain, and was maybe with MS Build you need to call it by yourself.
I don't know in the build process. I'm just wondering if all I have to do is, excuse me, reference the appropriate DLL.
Yeah, so if you use Visual Studio as a compile tool, so you have IDE compile this, then it will be automatically. If you use MS Build, I don't know, you need to check. So maybe you will need to, because it's a tool chain. By reference and assembly, you just have access to this new classes, to the contracts, but then you need to compile your code and put this code into binary rewriter, and this rewriter will replace all these monikers, all the contracts, with actual checks. So as I said, in Visual Studio it happens automatically, even from command line, with MS Build, I can check. And also you can do this, skip quantifiers. So quantifiers is what I mentioned before with this for each. Contracts for each, and because they're expensive, it's better to eliminate them from release code. So you can check and all contracts which include quantifiers will be removed, even if they exist in public APIs. So I want to finish on this high note, but unfortunately there are some issues with code contracts. So first, if you have lots of contracts and if you have lots of not just preconditions but post conditions, invariants, you may see build slowdown. So, yep, it exists, they work on make it faster, but it's still slow. Then if you use code contracts and you actively use edit and continue, you will be disappointed because edit and continue will not work for the code which use code contracts. Why? Any idea? Because it's rewritten, right? So you compile your code, then you apply binary rewriter, and then you have new code which edit and continue feature don't know how to handle. So basically, unfortunately, it doesn't work. And if you have heavily multi-threaded application, sometimes contracts may work unexpectedly. But this is actually not a feature, it's expected, but maybe unexpected in your condition. So just think that you have a couple of functions which verify state of the object, and then you have other function which runs in a parallel thread and modifies this. So sometimes it maybe not behave as you expected. Okay? But it's not a bug. It's just behavior when you have multiple access to the same properties from multiple threads. So if you want to start with this, as I said, it's part of .NET framework. So basically you can use .NET 4 to work with this. If you want to try abbreviation functions, so the one when you combine multiple contracts in one function and then call it, then you need .NET 4.5. So this attribute was added in .NET 4.5. If you want something more than just using contracts, so if you want to use this embedded toolchain inside of your Visual Studio, then you need to install this code contracts attribute. So basically you can search on Visual Studio Gallery for code contracts plugin, and you will have it. So this plugin adds toolchain for compilation, plus it adds this property page in your project. So without this plugin, you will not have all these properties. And I think, because I always use an Enterprise Edition, so I have all the features, but I believe for professional version, you will not have static code analysis. Is that correct? Do you know?
Certainly for Visual Studio 2013, I only had professional, and I was looking just at the static analysis.
Okay,
Professional
so
was
maybe,
fine.
yeah.
I have not tried it with 2015 yet, but
Because
So
I
we
remember
hope
at
you're not using that.
2010 time, it was not available. So maybe they decided that, okay, now it's available for everyone. So just know, if you will not see version for static code analysis, maybe your version is too low, you need to upgrade to something like premium or enterprise. And ReSharper. So if you use ReSharper, you can install additional code contracts editing extension. It allows you to just simplify your work with code contracts. For example, you can point on some argument of the function and say create contract for this argument, and it will automatically add you a couple of contracts for this argument. So in the way, like ReSharper simplifies your work with C# code, it may simplify some work with code expressions, with code contracts. Okay, so with this is all what I have. If you have any questions, I can answer now. Yes, please.
So the system works with editing the intermediate code, the binary rewriter that you mentioned.
Mhm.
So how does that play nice with obfuscation and things like that?
Yes, so I think obfuscation is applied after that. And what rewriters do, it just creates normal code. So no magic, it just puts some additional code, and it's not something specific. So obfuscation on top of obfuscation will not work. So it's not obfuscation,
Yeah.
basically, because sometimes obfuscation tools put some magic, some stuff which not plays nicely with other tools. But unlike obfuscation tools, this one is usable for other tools as well. So as you saw in just the code, just code. So nothing specific, simply one instruction replaced with a couple of methods to check your conditions.
It uses the same.
Yeah,
same
yeah,
base.
yeah. Same C#, no hidden features, no something that you cannot write by yourself.
How about refactoring? From your experience, let's say you develop first version with contracts, then you want to refactor. Is that gets in your way?
So I didn't have any problems, let's say this. So we have contracts, and if you put some more stronger contract, it may be a problem. So if you, for some reason, you decide, okay, previous version of my class was to lose on the contracts, on definition, so I want to put more. Here you should be careful, because you can break some of your clients. But if you want to put some additional contracts or move some code, usually it's not a problem.
If you change the class hierarchy.
Class hierarchy. If it's not a breaking change in other terms, then it will not break in change. Nothing will happen. Personally, I didn't see any problem because of refactoring and contracts.
So we talked about unit test coverage at the beginning, and you suggest you might not write a unit test because you have a contract.
I didn't say that. I said that some of your unit tests may be not needed anymore.
Well, some of his unit tests.
Some of our unit tests.
So my question was gonna be, will a test coverage tool pick up on contracts being there potentially and say that you've got coverage for that?
That's interesting.
So I was thinking about that for a moment, right? And the thing is, you would have normally had an if this thing was null, right? And so your code coverage tool is going to tell you whether you're checking both cases of the if. That is just not there, right? Because now, what I don't know is the code coverage tool going to be looking at the rewritten code with all the tries and catches and complain that you've got really lousy coverage, right? Because you're not testing all these different cases.
I don't know.
Do you use a code
So-
coverage tool?
Yeah, we use code coverage, but I didn't look how exactly it's treated.
Well, but if the code coverage tool, you would notice right away, if you're using a code coverage tool and it was checking into the code like he's suggesting, you'd be getting way less coverage because you said you cut out testing for the cases that are covered by your contracts, right? And so you would lose a lot of coverage if you weren't doing those tests, right?
Yeah, so probably it's check also this rewritten code. So I'm just trying to remember at which state we use code coverage. So is it before it's rewritten or not? Yeah, I need to check our build. So basically, do we compile with full and then run coverage, or we compile without anything, so like release version, and then put code coverage? I don't remember how it was configured.
I could imagine that the rewriter is smart with the metadata around the mapping of the code to the line number, and if it's mapping it back appropriately, then I could see it getting the coverage numbers for your code, not the rewritten. That'd be interesting to see.
I hope it's not. Okay, so then thank you for the time.